But as so many people here know, there has been a walkout going on at your offices across the country and the world, really. There are images you can look on your phone. It's trending on Twitter. But just speak to it. This came originally from a news report in the New York Times that exposed some of this stuff, and then you wrote a memo that elaborated and said there were 48 others where this experience had taken place, so you hadn't paid them. But just speak to how you feel about it right this second. When you see all of these headlines, what are you thinking?
Look, I mean, obviously it's been a difficult time. There's anger and frustration within the company. We all feel it. I feel it too. It's at Google we set a very, very high bar, and we clearly didn't live up to our expectations, and which is why we felt it was important to express our support for the employees today. And the first step you take in these things is to acknowledge and apologize for past actions, the pain they caused. We sincerely did that to the company. Secondly, words alone aren't enough, and you have to follow up with actions. And to be very clear, these incidents are from a few years ago, and we've evolved as a company. As CEO, it's been very important to me, personally meaningful to me, that we draw a hard line on inappropriate behavior, and we have done so for the past few years. And the last couple of years, as you mentioned, we have taken hard action. 48 people terminated, 13 senior managers. None of them involved any pay package of any sort. But moments like this show that we didn't always get it right, and so we are committed to doing better. We are listening to employees. That's partly why today is important. And I think there are concrete steps coming out in terms of what we could do better. So for me, I want to acknowledge the women who step up and do this. I think it shows extraordinary courage, and we want to figure out how to support them better. And it's a process, and I'm committed to doing better, and I want to make sure Google sets the bar for something like this.
Do you think there's a legitimate systemic problem in terms of the culture inside Google?
Sexual harassment is a societal problem, and I think, Google is a large company. We have had our share of issues. But I think, I can say we are definitely doing our best, and, I'm sure most people would tell you for the past couple of years, we have drawn a very, very hard line, and it is a different place.
But do you think there's something either about Google or even, let's broaden it out to Silicon Valley, where the rules perhaps were a little looser than they could and should have been?
Look, I think two things. There was definitely not enough representation. I think it's a common problem in tech, and I think that you can for sure. I think that is causal, right? Not having enough representation is part of the issue, and I would think there needs to be a deeper look at whether there were something else more systemic which led to things like this. But
so in the past couple of days since these headlines broke, and you're lying there at home at night, what are you thinking the mistake was that led to today? Was it something that could have been stopped earlier?
I think as a company internally, we've understood it and we've evolved,
right.
And but this is a look back at what happened, and so that But
so how much do you need to tell the public then about these 48 situations, for example, and how much can you tell the public about them?
Look, these are all cases where we have taken strong actions. We have terminated, and I think so. We have done that. There's privacy of people involved, and I think we have to be thoughtful about it. But internally, we do provide transparency. One of the feedback is, I think more than any other company on many areas, we do things differently. We publish to the company the number of investigations we have taken, what the outcomes are internally to the company. And one of the good feedback we have gotten over the past couple of days is, can you break it out better? Can you, delineate sexual harassment from other investigations? And some of it we are going to follow up and give more transparency. Google has a very transparent culture compared to most other companies, and so we're committed to doing so.
Okay, so here's the complicated part, and we were talking about this with Lisa Borders and Padma earlier. What do you think the policy of a company like Google should be when there is somebody who is being terminated for sexual harassment or something of the like, in terms of whether when they leave there should be confidentiality agreements or payment? And whether there should be a policy that says we don't do that, because the issue is that these people leave without people knowing what really happened, and then end up in other companies where perhaps some of these things could happen again?
We don't. I mean, we already don't pay people, and that's what our record for the past couple of years shows. And and beyond that, what you do, I think it's a good question. I think it's a complicated question, and I think some of it needs to be there needs to be due process and things which society needs to deal with, and we are grappling with it as are many places, and I think it's something which will evolve over time.
So your job, I mean, when I met you, I think originally you were like a product guy. We used to talk about Chrome and all sorts of techie, nerdy stuff.
Yeah.
And your role now has become one about, as much about that, I think, as about policy. Because there's this issue, there's the issue of the role that Google should play with AI and the government, which we'll talk about, and China and all of this. For you as somebody with your background, do you feel prepared for this? I mean, really, I ask it because there are certain people who spend their whole life learning about policy. They go off to the Kennedy School or whatnot, and then there are engineers who are in these roles. How should the public think about that?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm a technologist at heart, and we are fortunate to have over 8 products which serve 1 billion users every day, and I do spend a lot of time thinking about how we can build products which are more helpful to people on a day-to-day basis, and that takes a lot of my time. But I do think technology impacts society at scale, and at times like this, we are reflective and deliberative about decisions we make. And I think to me that's a natural part of the job. Recently I engage around the world. I engage with policymakers. I am encouraging increasingly policymakers have gotten more sophisticated about technology. They're grappling. Europe did important privacy legislation with GDPR. I think the US is looking at comprehensive privacy legislation, which we welcome. So I think these are important things. So whether it's being a technologist, policymaker, diplomat, I think they're part of the same job description for me.
Okay, so one of these issues that you had to contend with earlier this year was the role that Google will play when it comes to the Defense Department, and in particular something called Project Maven, and also in terms of what the cloud and Google Cloud was going to do in terms of working with the Pentagon. And you chose not to. We had Steve Ballmer on here earlier today, and he has a very different view about how technology companies should approach this. Brad Smith, who's Microsoft's president, recently said that Microsoft was born in the United States, is headquartered in the United States, and has grown up with all of the benefits that have long come from being in this country. And as a result, can't see how it's even possible that a technology company would not partner on these critical issues.
I agree with everything they said, and we partner with the military and deeply, and let me give you examples of that. Today, we are bidding for, and we work with the military and the government on many things. We have projects underway in cybersecurity, transportation, security, planning, et cetera. And we're committed to doing that. We cherish our values. We know we enjoy those values because our military protects us. In fact, the first ever product Google ever had in its history was a product called Google Search Appliance. The first contract was with the US government, and many agencies, including defense agencies, used it. So we've always taken the approach, and I'm very confident we are going to win more contracts in the future. So I think it's a bit of a misunderstanding to say we won't work with the military. It's quite the opposite. I think as we are developing AI, we want to be thoughtful about how we develop AI. And amongst the AI research community, there is consensus, narrow consensus around the use of AI and weaponry. And so we have drawn some lines there. And specifically for the military there are other companies, including the ones you talked about, which are qualified to provide it too. That has influenced our decision making. This is no different than biologists working on gene editing, are willing to draw some lines, and I think it's important for the discussion. And when you looked at a contract like JEDI, it was an all-in-one contract. We don't have all the certifications as a company yet to participate in a contract like that. But I think as the company evolves, we'll be able to do more and more work with the military, and we are deeply committed to doing so.
Okay, so let me ask you a separate question. It feels like, and you talked about the company being very transparent, and the employees clearly have a huge voice at this company. And I would argue that at least seems partially that this decision was driven by the employees who objected to it. Did you personally agree with this decision?
I mean, as leader at moments like that, you listen to concerns. We don't run the company by referendum. And I think one of the things which was important as we thought through this was the concerns from the senior AI community, people actually working on building AI, about where the state of the art is and how we need to have a few more steps before we proceed there. That weighed on me. And also as a company, we are not yet set up in a way. We don't have a federal division yet. And so being able to give employees choice on what you want to work on. But I want to stress that we're doing projects. Chronicle, our Alphabet sister company, has projects with US military currently on cybersecurity, right? And so we're committed to doing that.
How much pressure, though, do you think you feel from employees? I heard recently from a CEO who said, it feels like the employees have taken over the company.
Look, I mean, we've always said as a company for 20 years, and I think there are many things good about. We have given employees a lot of voice, and out of which we've done well as a company, and I think it's part of the process. I think other companies may not be used to it, and so it looks like that is how everything works, but that's not how everything works. There are decisions we make which they may not agree with.
How often are you frustrated, though, that these things become either public or all of a sudden there is a debate, if you will, almost a university-style debate inside your company?
Look, we are a company about freedom of expression and information. So we do build a different product compared to most other companies in the world. We provide platforms, allow people to communicate. So it's a natural part of what that goes with it. Right?
But let me ask you, last year, as you know, there was an employee who wrote a memo about women that ultimately you decided to fire. They would have argued that it was supposed to be a freedom of expression culture, right? The comments clearly were hurtful. Some people might even say hateful and inappropriate. But nonetheless, how do you balance that issue with the culture?
Well, look, I mean, everything we do, when we build our products, we have to balance freedom of expression with other things. And within the company, we allow for a lot of people to speak up, but we have a code of conduct, and it's important that you follow the code of conduct. Just because we allow people to speak up, you still have a code of conduct, and part of the code of conduct is giving everyone a right to participate in the company, in an equal opportunity environment. So we balance that, and that's what that was about.
Okay, let's talk about China, because that's the other big policy issue that you've had to deal with. You have started to test a service, a search service, which you could potentially offer in China. The second this got out, there were outcries across the board by so many. This coming from a company that pulled out of China, in part because of Sergey Brin's view about China being a forces of totalitarianism. How about that? Which I think was the original quote that he made. Take us inside the room. What was the thought? Who did you talk to? I assume, are you sitting there with Larry and Sergey saying, okay, actually, maybe this is the time we should actually change our view?
Look, I mean, first of all, we've been in China for a long time. We offered search from 2006 to 2010, and we decided to exit search, but we didn't leave the country. We have engineers there. We have a lot of employees there, and Android is used by hundreds of millions of users there, and we do develop an add to Android there. We are always exploring things as a company. Look, our mission is to serve everyone in the world, and so as part of that, it's natural we would think about users in China as well, but there are other times we have explored projects internally and chosen not to proceed because we do have a set of principles, and we would look at the condition.
Was there a tipping point? Was there? I assume to start a project like this, there had to be a conversation. And I'm trying to understand what it was that led, you think, to this moment where you said, okay, you know what, actually, I know we had this view. Let's at least start thinking about this potential other view.
Look, I mean, to be very clear, we just wanted to, first of all, both, not necessarily for search in China, understand as a company, there's been a lot of innovation in China's internet market. So it was important for us to understand what would our product look like in the context of it. So it was more an experiment, and that's how we started. And and obviously, as a company, we have taken a harder line on this than most other companies, and hence the scrutiny is greater too. And so to me, that's what it is. There's nothing imminent. We take a very long-term view. So that's where we are.
Vice President Pence said this when he heard about this. He said that he called on Google to immediately halt work on the project, labeling it a threat to democracy and a way to, quote, strengthen Communist Party censorship and compromise the privacy of Chinese customers. When you read that, what did you think?
Look, first of all, there are many other companies, our peer companies, which are doing a lot more in China than we are. So I think it's important to remember that. Anything we do here, we would consult with the US government, and I think we would be in thoughtful conversations. But there's nothing we are actually doing now, so it's more to debate.
Have you consulted with the Chinese government on this?
So we are regularly in conversations with everyone, and in China, to build a product, you need a license, et cetera, but not on this.
But did they know that you were testing this? I mean, had you talked to them about what that would look like?
I mean, I can't. I mean, I didn't directly talk to them on any of these things.
But do you think that there were conversations at some point?
I don't know.
Let me ask you this. This is Oracle CEO Larry Ellison on this topic. He actually twins these two topics we've just been talking about. He says, I think US tech companies who say we will not support the US military, will not work on any technology that helps our military, and I know you say you still are, but yet goes into China and facilitates the Chinese government surveilling their people is pretty shocking.
Well, first of all, we are working with the military, as I've clarified, and we are not in China on search.
Let me ask you a different question then. AI and China. We were talking to Steve Ballmer earlier today about this. You have a better sense, I think, of what the other technology companies in China are up to when it comes to AI. We talked about ethical AI earlier as well. Where is China in the sort of battle royale or war that people even talk about on AI between China and the US, given what you know that you are capable of doing and what you know that the Alibabas and Tencents and everybody else are capable of doing? What do you think is going to happen?
Look, I think AI, I think development is happening globally. I think it's important the US invests in AI. I think that there needs to be more public-private partnership. As a company, one of the reasons we are working hard in AI, I think, to your earlier point, I think it's important you ethically develop AI, and I think we feel the pressure to do so as well. But there is global development of AI. I think, based on what I can see from China, I think there's strong R&D in AI as well. And my view on something like AI, no different than other important areas, be it climate change or, you would need global frameworks to work our way through this.
But if you were to call this a race, where is the US versus China today, and where do you see that 5 years from now?
I haven't necessarily viewed it with that lens. That's not how I think about it. I do think US and China are going to be two strong centers for AI, and I think, and over time, hopefully, we figure out a way how to work together on it.
Right. Let me ask you a political question. We've talked a lot about politics in business today as well, and you're going to be going to Washington. There is a view in Washington that Google is a bastion of liberal employees and is focused on things against conservatives. How much does that worry you, and how much does that worry you in the context of potential regulation for the company?
Look, I mean, in our bread and butter today, we provide, when users come to us, we've done this for 20 years, we are focused on providing trusted, high-quality, accurate information. It's our mission to do that, it's our values, and it's in our business interest to make sure we serve everyone. In fact, as an American company, we get asked the same question outside of the US a lot. So for us, when you look at how we do search, there is no notion of political ideology in how we rank. We externally test it, we validate it in a very, very robust way. And and I think it's important for us. As a company, I think Silicon Valley is left-leaning, so we do have vocal left-leaning employees. We do have vocal right-leaning employees too. Increasingly, we are a global company. Last year was the first year we grew faster in the US outside of California than in California. And our leadership team is global too. So in some ways, our viewpoints are also complicated.
But tell me, there was a leaked video that went out on Breitbart, which you'll recall, of a number of senior Google employees lamenting the election of President Trump. When that leaked, what did you think?
Look, I think internally, as a company, I think it was given we are a company based in Northern California, and historically, in understanding the political leanings of Northern California, it was a post-election moment. I think it was no different than many other companies there, which went through something like that. As a company, we are transparent, and we hold these things, and so I think sometimes people look at it out of context. But to me, that is different from how we build our products, and we are committed to doing it in a nonpartisan way, and we've always done it so.
Regulatory question. Everybody talks about whether the big tech companies, the FANG companies, are going to ultimately be regulated. Is there a day that you think that Google could be too big? Do you ever say to yourself, this is where the tipping point is for us?
Look, I mean, we are regulated in many ways. GDPR is a form of regulation. We comply with it. We worked hard for over 18 months, and it's an important privacy regulation, and we supported it. So I do think, we care about these issues too as a company, and whatever the right construct is, I mean, these are societal issues. Society should decide how big companies are, and we are happy to be a part of the process and and participate in it.
Okay, I have 2 more questions, and then we'll open it up because I know everybody here has questions for you. A tech question. Go back to our nerd days for a second. When you think about search 5 years from now, we're all used to typing it in the search bar or going to Google. Obviously, there's voice, and you've done well there. Obviously, Amazon is now jumping into the voice game in a very big way. What does the future of search look like?
Look, I mean, there is a lot yet to come. When I think about, we want to be there where users are going to be. We want to anticipate and help them in a meaningful way, in a deeper way. We want them to lead happier lives, more healthy and productive lives. And to do that, there's a lot more we need to do. Like a lot of our queries are, for example, health-related queries. If you look at how we have evolved as a company in answering those queries from 5 years ago, we give a lot more deeper, meaningful information. We want you to be able to act on some information down the line. We want you to be able to say, if you're a busy mom or dad getting ready in the morning and your kids are sick, we want you to be able to say, hey, Google, get me the doctor appointment, and we want to be able to do that. So there's a lot of work underway to do things like that.
The business model has always been driven by advertising, and this has always raised privacy issues, right? Because you know a lot about me and so many people in this room. Do you ever think there will be a day where this becomes a pay-for service where there is no advertising element to it? When you think about the model long term, is that even feasible to try to get to the place that you are even today?
I mean, everything is possible. I mean, we don't have dogma about how we do this. We have a goal of serving everyone in the world. Today, our model allows us to serve billions of people. But, for example, YouTube today fully offers you a way to pay for YouTube on a subscription basis and not have advertising on it. So we are going to explore many different ways to do this, and we want to be what users want.
Right. Okay, final question from me, and we'll open it up. I want to know about the screen time policy in your home for your children. There was a New York Times report over the weekend that talked about actually Silicon Valley executives who don't allow their kids to use screens at all, which seems hypocritical and antithetical to the whole business. So what do you guys do?
Look, I mean, I'm like every other parent, I guess. I do test a lot of gadgets at home, so I have vulnerabilities in terms of how my kids get access to stuff. I was just, I don't know, last week I was at dinner with my son, and something came about, I was talking about something about Bitcoin, and my son clarified what I was talking about was Ethereum, which is slightly different. He's 11 years old, and he told me he's mining it, and which I didn't fully
He's mining Ethereum.
Yeah, that's right.
He's mining Ethereum.
The funny part, you wouldn't think, for
Do you have a server in your garage?
No, just a simple computer, though I built it myself. But I have to say, for people in this room, you would love that. I had to more explain to him how paper money actually works, because I realized he understood Ethereum better than how actually paper money works. So I had to talk to him about banking systems, the importance of it, and it was a good conversation.
Okay. Let's open it up and put the lights up real quick, because I know there are so many questions. Why don't we go right here first?
Hi. You all just touched on advertising. Obviously, Google is one of the biggest players for advertising dollars nowadays, very much, though, to the expense of the news media industry. How is Google nowadays going about ensuring that there's a good financial model for the future of news, as well as ensuring free press around the world?
It's a very important question. I've always been a deep believer in news. I grew up, and I still do. I read physical newspapers every day. I think it's not, it's often people take for granted the importance news plays in the functioning of democracies. And it's been definitely a difficult time for the news industry. I think one of the areas, advertising is part of it. We've increasingly focused on subscriptions and how to drive more subscriptions for high-quality news content, like the New York Times does. That's been an area of focus for us. We are investing in news. Our goal would be to partner with publishers to drive more traffic to them and make sure they can monetize it the way they choose to. So we've made many changes, and we are working on doing that. I'm more worried about local news. I think there are, evidence has shown. I think the top national newspapers are growing in subscriptions and actually doing well. But if you're a mid-market or more of a local news provider, I think that's been more difficult, and we need to do more there.
Okay, let's sneak in a couple questions. Right there, Dylan. Right up there.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time. I guess my question is, where is Larry Page? And I know you are the CEO of the company. He was called to testify alongside Jack Dorsey and Sheryl Sandberg on Capitol Hill. He did not do that. You have very much sort of been the voice surrounding this issue of sexual misconduct. I know he was in the room, he addressed staff, but in terms of public statements, sort of being the public, taking accountability for what's happened here, that has very much fallen to you. And I know you're the CEO of the company, but he is a co-founder and he is the CEO of the parent company. So is there just a sense that he does not have to be accountable to the public? Because you talk about this culture of transparency, and I sort of wonder if he ever feels like he has an obligation to step up and do that as well.
And the gloves come off. Go ahead.
Look, I think, I work with Larry closely, and Larry is very involved, and I think the way Alphabet was set up, I think Alphabet is a collection of companies, and with CEOs of the company, Google obviously being the largest one, and being able to do that, and so it's working as intended. That's how we set it up to be. But I think both of us participate, be it in company meetings or if there are important occasions where we need to speak up externally, and we will do so. I think it's an important part, and both Larry and I share that commitment.
I think I saw one final question. Why don't we do it right down here?
So you just said that AI is no different from other things. At the same time, you said that you do collaborate with the Defense Department on other things, but not AI. So I'm having trouble squaring those two. You seem to say that, senior members of the AI community seem to be against this. As one of them, I can tell you that there is no consensus around this.
No,
so at the end of the day, I still don't understand why you pulled out of Project Maven.
Can you
explain?
Look, to be very clear, when I said there are some senior AI members, and you're precisely right. I think it's an area where the industry is grappling with, trying to draw lines, and different people have different viewpoints, and I think that's really important to acknowledge and do that. And and that's part of what we are grappling with too. And there's many areas where we can work with, so we can apply AI for example, to help military with cybersecurity, and that's consistent with what we would do, and we would bid for those contracts. So, and I think it's important to understand there are many providers of these services for the military, and so we take that into account as well.
I want to thank Sundar. I have one final question. I am told that you have a crazy memory when it comes to numbers.
Oh, not anymore.
Specifically phone numbers. I was going to say, I don't remember any phone numbers anymore because I don't need to.
Well, growing up, because I had a rotary dial phone, or if I had dialed a number once, I would remember it for the rest of my life. So people would call me and ask me for numbers, because they would say, hey, do you remember that person's number? It was a common thing I used to do. But thanks to how phones work today, I don't have to do that anymore.
Home phone in India, do you remember?
Yeah.
You want to give it out, or is it old?
You really want me to give it out to a bunch of people now?
Your parents still living there?
Yeah, my home is there, and okay. So maybe not.
Sundar Pichai, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That was great. Thank you.
Even with all the turmoil going on right now, Trump is staying focused on what matters, attacking Amazon. Because just last week he tweeted, I am right about Amazon costing the United States Post Office massive amounts of money for being their delivery boy. Amazon should pay these costs plus. And